Since Eric has me wired, I'm going to set that other mic over there. Thanks for being here today. Probably the scariest thought a speaker can have is that nobody showed up, so you're here, thank goodness. Well, I'm feeling a little intimidated, or was in preparation of this, because if you have noticed, people like Maureen and Maura and Art and other people that have been giving messages, guest speakers and so forth, have been using this screen as part of their process. I haven't done that before. So I'm doing it today. So you may wonder, why on earth did Foster have this picture put up there? It's a pretty beautiful picture, but what's that got to do with cultivating awareness of our power? Let me tell you, this picture was taken by my wife Marilyn in Bhutan in 2007 when we were there on a trek. The time of year we were there, Bhutan was in the tail end of the monsoon season, the rainy season in Asia, and it was raining in Bhutan. And we were hiking for the first half of our trek in the mist and the fog and the drizzle. We could have been in Toledo and not known the difference. Then the morning, we had been camped at the foot of the mountain. It's just kind of peeking around the corner of the ridge line there at the base of it at about 13,000 feet for 3 nights, 2 days, just getting acclimated to altitude so we'd be ready for the higher parts of the trek. This is the Himalayas we're looking at. They're much, much higher than anything we could find in Colorado. So the morning after the acclimation period, we're getting up, getting packed, starting to walk, still in the drizzle and the mist. Might as well have been in Toledo or St. Louis. And we went up a pretty steep ridge line into a hanging valley. You can't see the lower end of it in the picture. There was a yak herd there and a family tending their yaks. Very picturesque. Stopped raining. Didn't really notice. I mean, it hadn't been raining hard, just drizzle and fog. Walked up past these 2 lakes, and the path gradually brought us up onto the saddle. We're probably standing at 15,000 feet here maybe, trudging along, and somebody says, "Holy mackerel, turn around and look behind you." This is what we saw. Stunning. It's hard to appreciate the scale of what you're looking at. That kind of pointy mountain on the right is 23,000 feet high. The one on the left that we had camped near the base of is 24,000 feet. So they're enormous places. The spaciousness that we were seeing was almost staggering after being around in the slop for 3-4 days. Anyway, the point of all this is, very often, the power that is innate within us, that Ernest Holmes talks to us about, seems hidden from us, just like this scene was hidden from us for days. But then when it comes out, wow, it's magnificent. So what we're going to do today is kind of cultivate awareness of our power. Science of Mind, New Thought, talk a lot about our power. Talk a lot about how our potential is unbounded, unlimited, how we are infinite, how we're amazing. She used the word amazing in her prayer this morning. And yet, the daily life that many of us lead most of the time feels more like this slide. You know, it's just feels like a struggle. Our experience of life seems so much below what we're told our potential is. So how can we access that potential? That's really what we're going to be talking about. It can be frustrating when this is the way life feels compared to what we think it should feel like, we're told it should feel like. We want to believe that our life can be so much better than it is, but sometimes our limitations and our boundaries seem more real than the potential that we're told about in the teachings. I can remember about 15, 18 years ago making this statement to the man who was my pastor at the time. Most of the problems people have relating to God are rooted in underestimating, understanding in way too small a way what it means to be human. He says, I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. It didn't really go much further than that. That was long before I knew anything about New Thought teachings, but it somehow came to me. Nothing I found in New Thought stands in opposition to that. So this morning we're going to try and expand our thinking about what it means to be human. We hear a lot about oneness. And this is what Ernest had to say about oneness. There's one life, and that life is God. That life is my life now. Every one of us. So because the teachings say we are one with the divine, an actual individualized piece of the divine, let's start by taking a look at God itself. Have any of you was on a lot during the basketball playoffs and noticed the AT&T commercials? One of them has this kind of small statured guy sitting in a little chair around a table with, I don't know, half a dozen 5-year-olds. And he says, please just tell me the biggest number you can think of. One little girl says, 80 bazillion gazillion, whatever she said, something crazy like that. And he looks at the next little boy and he says, 10? And he says to the kid, oh, that's not very much. Then another girl pipes up with a big sounding gazillion, bazillion thing, and another one. Finally, one little girl says, I know, infinity. And he comes back at her and says, how about infinity plus 1? And she says, how about infinity times infinity? And he goes, she just kind of blew him away with that one. Anyway, what do we mean when we say that God is infinite? Can we even grasp the idea, get our arms around the concept of infinity from within this finite experience of life that we have as human beings? How do we get to that? Well, here's what Webster, or one of his dictionary descendants, has to say about infinity. Large beyond measure, limitless, boundless, measureless. This refers to what has no known limits in extent, size, or quantity. It can be physical, like the limitless reaches of outer space. The Hubble pictures have done a good job of giving us a view of that. Or figurative, like boundless opportunity. Now we're getting back to what Ernest talks to us about. Mystics and others who have tried to explain God have come up with 3 omni words. They're kind of big, some of them are hard to say, but omni words. Omnipresent, God is omnipresent, everywhere present. I think it's St. Augustine that said, God is like a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Okay, omnipotent, 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 all-powerful. Nothing lies beyond God's ability to do, be, or create. Nothing. Omniscient, all-knowing. Nothing lies beyond God's knowing. There is no piece of anything that lies outside of God. So this is kind of what it means when we say God is unbounded or infinite. Occasionally, Usually during meditation, even people like you or me can kind of just sense the edges of this omni character we call God. Everywhere. No place it's not. Nothing exists outside of it. All of its creation lies within God. It's all included. That means you. That means me. Holy smokes. We are, therefore, each infinite. Wow. Wow. So here's what Ernest had to say about being human and infinite. The mind of God is infinite. Therefore, the mind of man is infinite, as is man's capacity to understand his true relationship to God or Spirit. What he's saying is our understanding kind of puts a boundary around how much of this infiniteness that we can experience, that we can know. So what about our body? This one is about 6'2". It used to be a little over, now it's a little under. I'm not sure if my body has shrunk or my hair has disappeared. But it weighs 200 pounds, plus or minus a scooch. You've each got one. Sometimes we look in the mirror and don't like what we see. Sometimes we say it's okay. Our body, according to what Ernest has said, is not a measure of who we are. It's not a measure of who we are. So what does Ernest have to say about our bodies? Okay. The soul needs a physical body here, else it would not have evolved one. When the physical body is no longer an adequate instrument through which the soul may function, it lays the body aside. So that's what Ernest says our bodies are. An adequate instrument for the expression of our soul. We are so much more than our bodies, so much more. So much more than the associated identity. Foster Harding, Ken Jansen, Dorothy. Okay. We're so much more than that. So much more. Because Science of Mind emphasizes the power of our word, I want to read the first 5 verses of the Gospel of John from the Bible. This is the Lamsa translation for those of you who might be familiar with it. The Word was in the beginning, and that Word was with God, and God was that Word. The same was in the beginning with God. Everything came to be by His hand, and without Him not even one thing that was created came to be. The life was in Him, and the life is the light of men. And the same light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. I would have said something slightly different in verse 4. I would say the life was in Him, and the life is the light of all creation. It's in everything. So here's the omni-truth about our potential. All knowledge, power, and wisdom are always with us, right here, right where we are, right now, in this very moment. That's the truth. Think about that. God's very nature includes each of us. We don't have to earn being part of the Divine One. We don't have to deserve it. We don't have to pray to be included. There's no special rules or ceremony involved. It's simply who we already are. From the beginning. From the beginning. And by the way, we didn't start belonging to God at our birth. We didn't start at all. We have always been held within the divine heart and mind from the beginning. This is the truth of who we are. So why is it then that the bumper sticker so often seems true? Happens. We found a cleaned up version. Guano happens. Why is it that life often feels more like this than powerful? Jesus provided the answer. Not surprising. Remember the story, some of us have heard it, others may not know it, about a Roman centurion who came to see Jesus. A Roman centurion is like a mid-level officer. The century thing comes from he has 100 men under him. He is desperate. His son is dying. He is dying at home. And he has heard about this miracle working dude, and he is looking for Jesus. He finds him, he runs up to him and says, "Oh, please heal my son." He says, "Whenever I tell my soldiers what to do, they do it." Just like that, if you just say the word, my son will be healed. And Jesus looks at him and says, "Wow, in all of my travels and all my ministry, I have never seen such faith as this. Go. Be it done unto you according to your belief." And the narrative ends by saying, and in that very hour, his son was healed. So let's put up the next slide and kind of look at our power symbol. Jesus' parable, the story, it's not a parable because it's purported to be an actual event, says that before we can experience this sort of power in our lives, we have to accept it. The gift is always already given. We have to accept it. The way we accept our truth is to believe it deeply, so deeply that you feel the truth of it in the marrow of your bones, so to speak. So what are we to think about this story? Was the centurion's boy healed by the power embodied in Jesus, or by the power of his father's belief? Jesus told the man, go, let it be done unto you according to your belief. So I think that's our answer. When our belief is that strong, we will experience the miraculous in our lives as well. So what about this feeling thing? Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God says, feeling is the language of the soul. I've been using that for years, and until I got chasing this message around, I've forgotten where I found it, but that's it. If you want to know what you believe about something, look to how you're feeling about it. If you go to the divine in a treatment or an affirmative prayer and feeling hopeful, or I hope I'm worthy enough, you put a boundary on that power. Your belief is not, you're not feeling that belief truly deeply. Sometimes examples from 2,000 years ago in a book like the Bible seem so distant in time, kind of nebulous, fuzzy. We're not sure if it's really an actual event we're reading about, or somebody is trying to put a metaphor in there to help us get the idea. Should we take it literally or not? So let's go with a couple of more recent examples. Let's go with Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, the founders of Unity. They were born in the mid-1800s, lived into the 1930s and 40s. I don't remember which one went first and so forth, but they were the founders of Unity. Late in the 1800s, Myrtle contracted tuberculosis. In those days, tuberculosis was a death sentence. And it wasn't a quick, painless deal. You got to gradually, over months or even years, lose your lung capacity to where one day your body just quit because you were drowning in your own lung fluid. A horrible way to go. Through the power of her belief, Myrtle was healed from tuberculosis. Maybe Charles' example is even kind of more dramatic in some ways. Somehow, by the time he was an adult, probably from polio, but I don't know that part of the narrative, his one leg was 3 inches shorter than the other. You can imagine Charles walking with an extreme limp, a lot of pain, his body's being kind of distorted by the deformity in his leg. By the power of his belief, over a 3-year period, that leg grew after he was adult, till it was equal in length to his other leg. So those are events where the miraculous kind of entered the lives of someone in much more recent times. So why? Why do only a few seem to experience the intervention of the miraculous into their lives, and most of us don't? I want to tell you, I'm not here as an expert. I am here as a seeker trying to understand and learn just like all of you. I think that's why so many of us are drawn to religious science and New Thought teachings. They offer us hope. They offer us hope. Let's talk a little bit about scientific mind treatment, prayer. In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest describes how his perception of how it works. He postulates a law that even the divine, even God has to obey, such that if we approach the divine through a 5-step process, kind of spelled out pretty detailed, that the divine responds to us and the event manifests. I've always struggled with that explanation ever since I first heard it. If God is everything, who passed the law that God has to obey? I submit that it's more like it's God's nature. It's just the way He is, just the way God is. It's God's nature that is that way. It's eternally, naturally giving. The gift is always already given. And later in his life, Ernest must have come along to a similar concept, because this isn't a quote from Ernest also. Prayer does something in the mind of the one praying. It does not do anything to God. The eternal gift is already made. So for me, treatment or affirmative prayer has become pretty easy to use, pretty straightforward tool. But it's not the tool or the words that move the divine. The divine's already moved. Those words, that process, is a means by which my own internal belief becomes stronger. And it's that belief that allows the flow to enter our life. So that's my take on how treatment works. It's kind of a later version of Ernest's explanation, and I think our teaching often focuses on the earlier version, and it works, but it only works because it helps a person deepen their belief. The gift is always already given. God is divinely generous beyond our wildest imagination. Joel Goldsmith, another New Thought teacher from similar time frame as Ernest, I don't think they were partners or friends even, they had kind of their own pathway, but very similar ideas. Joel has some very direct things to say about our relationship with the divine. It's a waste of time to ask God for anything, because God is not withholding it. God is not withholding anything from this universe. God is not withholding anything from anyone for any reason. He goes even further. God doesn't condemn anyone. God has no pleasure in sacrifices. The kingdom of God does not have to be sought. It merely has to be recognized. Joel was pretty emphatic. His healing methodology was simple. He says, all you have to do is realize deeply the ongoing presence of God. Right here, right now, deeply in the marrow of your bones. If you realize that, any doubts, any misgivings are gone, and the flow happens naturally. Here's what Ernest had to say about the power of belief. The Spirit can make no gift that we do not accept. Our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of a principle which of itself is without limit. The principle is ready to fill everything because it is infinite. It is entirely a question of our own receptivity. As much as we can believe will be done unto us. It's very parallel to what Jesus told the centurion. It's not the words of the treatment that moves the power of the divine. It's the power of our belief that opens the door for what was already given. A treatment is effective only to the degree that it supports our inner conviction that the words are true. This is the point of the whole speech. Our belief is our power. Our belief is our power. It's not words, it's not magic from somewhere. The gift is already given. It's our belief that opens the door for its flow into our lives. Our belief is our power. Let us pray.